Hello there. Welcome to episode 6 of The Roar Within, the Trinitonian Sports Podcast, now out on Spotify as well as on YouTube. I'm your host, Scott Lebo, and sports reporter with the Trinitonian. I'm joined today by my co-host, Cole Isaacson. How we doing?
Doing great. We're on Spotify. We made it.
We're on Spotify.
That's
it's
great.
Amazing. And we've also got a special treat today. Our guest, Reed Rosales, is already here to review games with us. Reed is a political science major and commentator with Tiger Network. He calls baseball with Cole. He's also on basketball games and does a variety of things with Tiger Network. Reed, how are we doing today?
I'm doing great, General Lebo.
Before we get into reviewing Trinity events from the weekend, I'll ask you both, who are your athletes of the week? Cole, we'll start with you.
My athlete of the week is Michael Lustina of Trinity Baseball. Tiger is able to take 2 of 3 against the Shriner Mountaineers, and Michael Lustina hitting his first home run of the season. So he is my athlete of the week.
Reed, what do you got?
Well, I've got junior men's golfer Carter Code, who won a tournament for the first time in his collegiate career as men's golf went out and finished second at the West Region Invitational. Code hit 15 birdies on the day. He finished 3 under par for the entire course, 3 strokes ahead of his Crusader and Yellow Jacket adversaries. That's why Carter Code is my player of the week.
Golf were actually in action earlier last week before episode 5 featuring Josie Napoli came out. So we wouldn't normally review that. But Reed, I want to ask you what happened at the Invitational that the golf teams took place in.
Yeah, West Region Invitational at Berry Creek Country Club, Georgetown, Texas. The women's got a really big victory. They won by over 30 strokes over UT Dallas Southwestern and a team out of the UMAC, University of Northwestern at St. Paul. Golfer Jessica Mason finished first. She shot 1 over par, which was 6 strokes ahead of the next player after her from UTD. Lauren Huddleston also finished with 9 over par for 3rd place. On the men's side, we have the aforementioned Carter Code, who finished first for the Tigers. They finished second in a stacked West Region Invitational. Number 8 ranked Laterno finished first. Number 12 Tiger team finished second. They were about 10 strokes behind the Yellow Jackets, but a really good showing. They actually tied with the University of Mary Hardin Baylor, who's ranked number 25. But men's golf, they're in a really good position to go much deeper than they have in recent years here in the 2025 season.
Skipping ahead then to Friday and the rest of the events that we're going to go ahead and review. Track and field, we're back in action after being home last weekend for the Trinity Invitational. They were at the David Noble Relays at Angelo State. For more information on that event, head on over to the Trinity Tigers website. Softball and baseball were both in action this weekend in series with Shriner. Softball were on the road, baseball were at home. Cole, for once you weren't on those games. Reed was covering them alone. What do you guys think about what happened this weekend versus Shriner?
Well, it's definitely a mixed bag in terms of baseball. Did not start very well. That was a pretty unexpected loss, 6-4 in extra innings. Hard fought on both sides, but Tigers not getting the result they wanted. More of what we expected on Saturday, I would say. Run rule, I think against a team that's at the bottom of the conference like that, that's what you would hope from Trinity, who's pretty secured in their position at the top of the conference. And then more in the middle on Sunday, finding a way to win a close game, but definitely closer than expected. I don't know what you think, Reed.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you said, Cole. At game 1, that was pretty shocking. It's just a lot of chances on the base paths that the Tigers just couldn't convert on. Game 2, they hit 7 home runs. It's the most they've hit since a game in 2022. And then they had a 1-run win. Game 3, it was close. Again, it maybe should have been a bigger margin of victory. They're ahead by 2 games over Concordia in the baseball standings. But you keep dropping these weird one-off games, then Concordia is going to sneak up on you very quick. I think this Tiger team can turn it around. They've shown that they're very capable. So I have all the faith in the world that they're going to really take it to their next opponent.
On the other side of that series against Shriner, softball were on the road in Kerrville. They got the win in that first game, 12-2, and continued into the doubleheader on Saturday. 2 wins there, 10-1 and 7-0. What do you guys think about those results and what it means looking forward at the rest of softball season?
Yeah, softball got a relatively non-competitive sweep. They didn't run rule the Mountaineers in all 3 games, but still, it was over by the time the 7th inning had rolled around. Multiple bombs hit. Sydney Watson had a home run. I'm really excited for her about that one. It's her first home run of the season, maybe of her career. Don't quote me on that. But yeah, really good sweep for the Tigers in their march towards the SCAC tournament.
And I think that's what we've seen out of this team all year. They really dominate inferior competition. All of their losses are to really good teams, teams that you would arguably say are better than them. But anytime they play a team that's clearly below them in terms of talent or skill level or standings, they really beat up on them. And it was really no different this weekend.
For tennis, they were also in action this weekend. Men's tennis were in Ohio. First, they were at number 5 Case Western, and they took the loss in that one 6-1. They continued on Saturday up against number 3 Denison from number 5 to number 3, a really tough away trip. Lost that one as well by a score of 6-1. Going into Sunday then, as Cole and Reed mentioned, baseball were in action then. Women's tennis as well. They were in SCAC action at Southwestern in Georgetown, Texas, and got the 7-0 sweep there. What are we thinking about tennis and their prospects for the rest of the season?
Yeah, for men's tennis, it is a tough trip. But what I like about the men's tennis program is that they are not afraid to play really good competition. I'm curious to see how it plays out with the NPI system. In normal circumstances, I'd say that they are a lock for the NCAA tournament. But with NPI, it's kind of like, I don't know at this point. The women's team is looking closer and closer to a lock for the NCAA tournament. They are really, really good this year. Ruth Hill and Ellie Hughes, they've been killing it. And I'm just excited. They're going to dominate that SCAC tournament at the end of the year. Not different than what they've done in the past decade or two.
I mean, you mentioned those tough schedules, both men's and women's tennis playing tough schedules over the course of the year. We know women's tennis played the number 1 team in the country, and that just prepares you for what's down the road. If you make the tournament like you hope to, and you run through the SCAC like maybe you're expected to, those are the teams you're going to have to play, and hopefully that'll pay dividends for them.
Well, for once, we do not have any midweek action to cover before this podcast comes out on April 11th. So we'll move straight into our interview section. Reed, you're already here. You're already introduced. Are you ready for your interview?
Potentially.
Well, Reed, how did you first get into sports growing up?
Well, my entire family are Dallas Cowboys fans. And of course, if you've ever been a fan of the Dallas Cowboys, you don't just stumble into them. Usually your family is big fans, especially if they've lived in Texas for a long time. It's either them or nothing for you. And yeah, I've been a fan of the Dallas Cowboys for a long time. The worst time to be a Cowboys fan because they haven't done anything in my lifetime, really. But it started with that. We've been a big baseball family for a long time. My brother won the last state championship at our high school. His face is still on the side of the board because that's the last time they won it in 2014. And yeah, that's kind of how I got into sports, is just our family's been really big into sports my entire life.
So building on some of that fandom, I know we usually do that at the end of the interview, but we can start with it at the beginning this time. I know you're very into the Arkansas Razorbacks. You're from there. Can you just talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, Arkansas Razorbacks. I love Arkansas. I mean, it's the only major sports team within like a 100-mile radius of Bentonville, unless you want to count the Naturals, the minor league team that the Royals have there. I don't really count them. But with Arkansas baseball especially, they are so good year in and year out. And there's a fan section called the Hog Pen. And if you're a left fielder for an opposing team, good luck out there because they are going to be nagging on you the entire game. It's awesome. And even though the Razorbacks go and break my heart year after year after year, I will never stop supporting them. Even their club level sports, their hockey team, really, really good. They've been dominating for the past 5 years. Yeah, everything's awesome when it comes to U of A sports.
I think clearly you have a level of knowledge when it comes to being a fan that's a little beyond the average fan. Even when we talk about Trinity Sports here, I mean, Cole and I might even say you could run circles around us with Trinity Sports, and we're the ones with the podcast. At what point did your interest in sports and fandom in sports become something that you were so passionate about and so invested in?
I think really what it was is 2007, the Cowboys had a really, really good team. A good team that got bounced in the second round of the playoffs, unfortunately. But it was a really, really good team. And at that time, I was really young. I was 4 years old. But I still remember that team, that Tony Romo era. And it just inspired me to just know more about the team. I know a couple years ago, I could probably name every Dallas Cowboy on the 2016 team, from the kickers to the long snapper to all the offensive linemen. And I was a really big fan. I still am a big fan, maybe not as much anymore, though, that I've gotten to Trinity. I've kind of been in the Trinity lore for past 4 years. But yeah, that's kind of the moment where I went like, man, this is really something that I can get myself attached to.
You know, it's funny going back to that 2007 season because the Cowboys got bounced by the New York Giants. So Scott didn't know it yet, but he was also rooting for the Dallas Cowboys in that game and wished that they would have won in hindsight. So it's funny how things work out like that sometimes. I want to talk about what you do at Trinity right now. We obviously call baseball games together, and you've called a number of other sports. You've really filled the Brian Yantelson void to some degree. How did you get into that? I know you didn't start there. How did you start doing that?
So in high school, my friend Alex Wells, he offers me one day at lunch, like, hey, do you want to come work for the high school broadcast? And I think, like, I have no idea what I'm doing. No. So I say no for week 1. He asked me week 2. I say no again. He asked me week 3. I say no again. He offers to drive me to an away game to do a stream. And I say no again. And then week 5 rolls around and I said, okay, you know what? You've asked me 4 times. I'll do it this time. I have no idea what I'm doing. He's like, you don't need to know what you're doing. I go there. It's the easiest thing in the world to learn. It comes so naturally. And I loved it. And also we got free canes at the game. And we got free canes at every game, which was also definitely a very enticing prospect.
Are you saying he didn't lead with that?
He did not lead with that. No, he did not.
That would have been the first thing out of my mouth, like free canes. Like, yep. All right, let's go.
But it was such a ragtag group in high school because unlike Tiger Network, we went and did every away game as well, which meant driving to Kansas City from Bentonville, which is like a 4-hour drive, and then driving back the same day, be home by 3 a.m. Some games had no power, so we literally turned some of our power cords into a lasso and threw it out the window to get like a power socket that was on the stairwell. Not every place was conducive to an away broadcast, but we went and did it because that's what the fans want. They're expecting a good show, and were we not to give them a good show? That's kind of the mentality I've carried to the Tiger Network as well. I didn't know that Trinity had such a big, extensive network, but we had this thing coming out of COVID where we had a passport, quote unquote, and you'd go to every department and they'd stamp your passport. I think it was a sticker actually, but it doesn't matter.
Oh, I remember that.
Yeah, we had
during
that.
orientation.
Mm-hmm. I went to sport management and Dr. Ting was like, if you're interested in working in the sports broadcast, write your name down here and I'll get you to the executive producer and you can talk with them. I put my name down and I don't hear back from anybody in like 2 weeks.
Yeah, that tracks.
So I go to the coach center and she's like, oh yeah, I can get you to Josh Makazuma, which is how I thought Josh's last name was pronounced for 2.5 years until I called a game with him and he told me how it was pronounced. I always just called him Josh before I found out it was Machigemba. So she gets me in touch with him. I go in really nervous, but it is just like how it was in high school. A much more advanced setup than we had in high school. But Josh is such a personable guy. He knows how to really hook you into working at the Tiger Network. And from then, it's history. I worked, my first game was the neutral women's soccer game. It was Cal Lutheran versus UT Dallas, I think. It had one of the saddest goals I've ever seen that rolled in because our field is actually tilted. And it was that made me kind of fall in love with Division III sports. Like, that doesn't happen at any other level. And that's just history from there.
Was it always commentating for you when you were working on these broadcasts, or did that come later?
That came a year later. I started out as just a camera operator. That's what I was great at.
What did you do in high school?
I was camera operator.
Okay.
I took in the role of executive director for a couple games in the later part of my career there. But for the most part, it was just camera operation. I did some replay, but I love running cameras. So I did that for such a long time. And then one day, Brian Yantelson, who's now an alumni with the Missions, legend, we are about to do Laverne versus Trinity volleyball my sophomore year. He's like, here, come do the audio test with me, because we have to test the audio before every game usually, because if you don't know, audio is the most difficult part of any broadcast.
Don't have to tell me.
Yeah.
Yeah, the podcast editor. There you go.
So yeah, you definitely know that, Scott. It is like borderline miserable to try and get the audio working sometimes. And Brian introduces it as like it's an actual broadcast, and I just riff off of him. And he's like, hey, you're pretty good at this. Have you ever considered doing this for the Tiger Network as like a full-time thing? And I just kind of shrugged my shoulders like, I don't know, it's been a thought before. And then a couple weeks later, we did a neutral game together. My first broadcast was UC Santa Cruz versus Susquehanna, a matchup that will never, ever happen again. UC Santa Cruz, I mean, if you don't know where they are, I can't help you. And
The banana slugs.
Yeah, the banana slugs, exactly. They had a banana slug plushie on their bench.
Wow.
That's awesome.
I almost went down there to buy it because it was amazing. But it was Susquehanna is from Pennsylvania, so it was two teams from opposite ends of the country playing each other. And man, I have listened to that broadcast once or twice, and I cringe every time because I am so timid. Like, wow, that was a really good play. And it's like every broadcaster's first game. But it was awesome. That was a really cool experience. And then when we got to basketball season, we have no color commentator for, I believe it was St. Thomas versus Trinity. And Brian is like, I'm alone for this broadcast. Would you like to get on the air with me? And everything in my mind said, no, don't say it. You're not ready. No. But my heart said yes. And I went out and did it, and it was awesome. And I ended up doing the next day too. And I just became the full-time color commentator from then on. And we had a great year for both sides. It was really exciting. We hosted the SCAC tournament, and that's probably the coolest thing I've gotten to do here.
And you've kept going ever since. You eclipsed 400 events just a few weeks ago over spring break. So congratulations on that.
On the mic?
No, in general.
Okay.
I think you're getting over 100, maybe 200.
I don't know if I'll reach 200. That's going to be a tough ask, but I'll be either 198, 199, something like that.
Wow.
Find those extra 2 games. We got to get them in somehow. You got to get to 200. You can't be that close and not do it.
I called a track meet.
There you go.
Caleb Reed, our other broadcaster, had to go work at the Spurs and just like, okay, let's hop on. I'm like, what? And I called the 4x400 for both sides, something I'd never done before. There's like 500 names written down over here. Yep. And I'm just, I don't know. That was a good run.
They were very fast that time.
Well, that player was faster than that player. And therefore, is that the hardest event you've had to call?
I think that was the hardest event I had to call. I've never thought about calling it. And then just like, okay, let's hop on. Oh, okay. No prep, a sport that I had seen in the Olympics, but I don't remember any of the calls for any Olympic event in running. But I had heard Caleb, so that had helped me out a little bit. So I wasn't completely in the dark about what to do. I wouldn't give myself a 1 out of 10. Maybe a 5.
There you go. That's probably, if it was curved, I think you did pretty well.
Well, Cole and I have both hopped on broadcast as well. I've done color commentary for soccer, and Cole has done football and baseball in multiple different roles with each of those. But you've got a wide variety of sports. Could you give us a list?
So I did volleyball color commentary for a couple games. I did volleyball play-by-play for my junior and senior year. I've done both sides of basketball, men's and women's, for color and play-by-play. And I have done softball, color and play-by-play. I've done baseball, color, and play-by-play. I guess I can add track now. I don't know if I was really a color commentator or a play-by-play, but I did that. I think the only sports I haven't touched at all have been soccer for both sides and football. But yeah, I've done quite a few things now that I'm listing it out like this. It's kind of put it in perspective.
You know, when you go to Celsius, they tell you that a resume is only supposed to be 1 page for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't know how you're going to accomplish that.
I don't think any of us are going to be able to get a resume down to
it's
1
like,
page.
All right, 6-point font. There we go. I'll send over like a magnifying glass with my resume, and then that's how we'll get it done.
One of the best things about doing the commentary for all these sports is working with all the other commentators. Working with Cole has been awesome. Working with Brian for basketball, that was really cool. Luke Terry, who is the best color commentator we've ever had. He can never be beat, in my opinion.
Not even close.
Worldly. Scott, you're awesome on the mic for soccer. I love listening to you and Chris. It's such a good dynamic between you and Chris. It's very good, but I know Luke called 1 soccer game, I think, and he's like, yeah, I can never do that again. So you have that over him. But working with Jade Schoenberger and Annika Science, every person you commentate with, it's a different variety. Because like with Cole, Luke, and Brian, it's like, these are people who I've been commentating, right? But with Annika and Jade, these are former athletes. These are athletes, and they commentate in a much different way than Cole and Luke and Brian do. It's about finding that chemistry together and working together to make that perfect broadcast.
I wanted to ask you about the aforementioned Josh Mushigemba. There's a lot of different stories that you can bring up about Josh, but do you have one in particular that do you think best describes Josh, the person, just so people can get a sense of who we're talking about?
I think it's just every time we have comms for a game, that is my defining moment for Josh. If you don't know in a broadcast, this goes for every level of sports, by the way. When we are not live on air or you are a camera operator, we are just talking and talking and talking usually. And Josh is the funniest person to have on the mic. He's so good on the spot and on the fly with jokes. Be out on the football field and I'll get a shot. He's like, yeah, I didn't pay you for that. Keeps the mood light in the control room. We don't want it to be this ultra serious, like, you're not here on time, you're going to get fired. No, we want it to be a big friend group just running a broadcast. That's the vibe of the Tiger Network. And it's Josh that really makes that vibe accentuate itself. And it's also, he's a really good at telling you, what you can do better, what you did well. He's just been a really good mentor over the past couple of years. And with all he has to deal with, because, obviously the sports don't work together to schedule things, defining moments for Josh are just, you can't name one. It's just Josh as the man himself is a defining moment.
You mentioned high quality broadcasts under a number of different circumstances. And, I've had the opportunity, and I'm sure many of our listeners have as well, to watch a number of Trinity broadcasts and watch sports through that lens. They're really high quality broadcasts, from graphics to camera quality to commentators all across the board. What do you feel like you specifically as an individual bring to Tiger Network that makes it so special?
I think what I bring to the Tiger Network to make it special is that I am ready to do any role that needs to be filled, whether that is camera, graphics, replay, switchboard. I can go anywhere and do anything that Josh asked me to do because I like doing all of it. It is a pure enjoyment of every position at Tiger Network. You could put me on audio and I'd just be listening to the stream and making sure nothing goes wrong. And I'd enjoy that. That's kind of what I did for track, that we needed to fill that role. All right, let's jump in. Let's do it. I love sports. I don't love any particular sport. I just love sports as a concept.
And then do you have any future ambitions with this? I know you're applying to different law schools, but is there a way that you want to keep sports around in your life?
Yeah, hopefully wherever I go, they'll let me in the door for the sports department so I can continue to do things in a sports capacity, because I love doing sports. Maybe if I stick around the San Antonio area, I'll continue to help out the SID department with writing their previews. I know Adam has done stuff with A&M, even though he's not necessarily, a sports-centered major, right? Environmental literature, I believe. He was a really good cameraman for the Tiger Network.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Difficult loss for us, in my opinion.
Beyond in law school or continuing to work in sports at wherever you go after Trinity, would you see yourself pursuing a job in the sports industry professionally, or is that not the direction you're going in?
I'd love to do that if the opportunity presents itself. I mean, one of the big things that lawyers can do is be sports agents. I think that would be a really cool profession to go into. It's something I want to do. It's just the opportunity needs to really present itself to me. And it's really difficult to break into this industry. It's you need to go out and get it.
When you're looking at a broadcast from whatever role that you're in, what do you want it to look like?
I want to make sure that, first of all, you can look at the stream and see where the ball is pretty much at all times. You understand the flow of the game and have the smoothest broadcast possible. I never want to say perfect broadcast because you're never going to have a perfect broadcast. Some of the small things too, with having camera operator number 3 get a zoom in shot of Ryan back before he takes a snap. It's those little things as well that add so much to a broadcast that maybe the average person doesn't think they do, but in the back of your mind, it does make a big difference. It's what makes us different from a school like Dallas that has one camera setup, commentator that doesn't know half the team's names. But yeah, when you're on the mic, it's to describe it in a way where somebody could look away from the screen and still know what happened on the last play. I treat this as a radio broadcast approach because, I know a lot of people put our streams on and then just leave them on in the background. So I don't want to leave them in the dark when it comes to any cool moments that may happen.
Well, we get some high quality broadcasts that allow our viewers to look at some high quality sports from our Trinity athletes. But I want to move towards our debate topic. And Reed, you have sort of a hot take for us to discuss before we go into previewing games next week.
I'm going to just start the debate topic off like this. NFC East, AL West. I hate them. I hate all of them. In my opinion, conferences and divisions in the major 4 sports is part of an antiquated time of sports history that I don't think we should have anymore. I think we should just have the NFL, the MLB, the NHL, the NBA, and that's it. We don't need an AL and NL. And there's a couple reasons for that. First of all, the differences between the conferences is negligible. You could show an outside fan a game between two NFC teams and two AFC teams. And if you ask them, hey, which conference did you just watch? They'd have a 50-50 chance because they'd just be guessing at that point because there is no difference. It used to be different in the MLB, but now that everybody has a DH, like what's the difference between the two sides at this point? Another thing is there are teams every year in every sport that get into the playoffs that really shouldn't be in the playoffs. For the NFL the past couple of years, it's been the NFC South. They have put in some bad teams in the playoffs and they get bounced early. It's like, wow, what a fun game to watch. I got to watch this team get pummeled 37-7 at home. That was a really exciting game, NFL. Thank you very much. I think if you get rid of divisions and conferences, you're not going to have that anymore. You're going to get the best teams for the best playoffs possible, which is what we should have. Having this automatic qualifier thing, that's something for college level. That's not something we should be doing in the professional level of sports, in my opinion.
I like everything you've said so far. The problems I think Cole will have as well, are going to come to specific areas. And I'll leave one of them to Cole because he's an expert in that area. I won't talk about the schedule.
Okay.
But travel, I think, is one that people will talk about quite a bit. Part of the reason I think divisions still exist in the way that they do is to mitigate the amount of travel that teams have to do across country in these big road trips. What do you think about the travel aspect of divisions and conferences? And do you think they actually still bring anything at all?
My counter to this is that at this point, each major sports franchise has so much money that I don't know if they even look at the travel costs anymore. California is never going to have travel problems for any of their teams because there's multiple teams in every sport. I mean, in MLB, you can have a California division. That's how many teams are in California. The big problem teams are like teams in Seattle, I guess. Yep. They have a problem. And maybe, well, not even Milwaukee, because you have Chicago right down the road. But I think most teams that are in these professional sports leagues are close enough to every other team that it's an exception if there's going to be travel problems. And I think that exception can be easily mitigated. Maybe if we were talking about college sport, which I would also maybe slightly support not having conferences in college sports either, but maybe that's a debate for a different time. But that's what my counter to that would be.
I don't know. I don't think of it as cost because you're right. They have so much money. They don't really need to worry about that. I think of it as like player health.
And practice time.
And practice time too. I guess like we're limiting the amount of times that we have to go cross country because you're right that California teams can play each other a lot, but that's why we have divisions so that the Dodgers can play the Padres and they can play the Giants and the Rockies and Arizona, those teams that are all right around them a bunch. And then they don't have to play some of these other teams as much. That would be my main counter to the travel aspect. And then going into the scheduling aspect that you mentioned, it just creates a lot of fun action with rivalries. That's why I love divisions. That's the main reason why I'm in full support of them is because when you play a team so much, you just don't like them. And if you abolish divisions and everybody plays each other the same amount, it's just not going to have that same sting to it because Ohio State and Michigan, getting back to college, are rivals because they play each other at the end of every year, and it's an event, and they don't like each other because of it. And there's a lot of historic chapters that come even at the professional level with that when you play a team over and over again. And I think that that's a little bit almost of like what a sport like hockey is missing because divisions in hockey and basketball just aren't what they are. It's conferences based on East and West, and the divisions are kind of a side thing. And because of that, those rivalries don't spring out as much in regular season play. But with baseball and NFL, you're playing your divisions constantly. It just breeds a certain contempt for the other side. And that makes the sport really interesting when those two get together.
Well, my big counter to that is that you don't need divisions to just schedule an opponent near your area more. Divisions don't have to exist for that. Neither do conferences. And when you bring up college football, if the Big Ten or the SEC broke apart tomorrow, they don't exist anymore. You ever think Alabama would never, ever schedule like Texas A&M ever again? I find that a bit hard to believe. And I think we've seen at the college level, Notre Dame, who doesn't have a conference, have a lot of success. They get all the money from their playoff wins to themselves because they don't have to go to their conference and say, well, here's the money that we have to divvy out. And I think another thing, at the Division III level, my favorite conference, the Coast to Coast Conference. These are teams from New Jersey to New York to Wisconsin to California to almost Texas that play in one single conference. And the brilliant part is they play 0 conference games all year. The only time they see each other is their conference tournament. And guess what? They get an at-large bid because the only rule in NCAA is that you need 6 teams. That's brilliant, because if you're Christopher Newport, you can go from playing Whitewater one week to Johns Hopkins the next, to Trinity the next, to Laverne the next. It gives you so much freedom and scheduling, and you can still schedule teams near your area. Salisbury and Christopher Newport are in the Coast to Coast Conference, and they play each other a lot because they're near each other. And I think that's the big thing that I like about my argument for no conferences.
The one other thing I would bring up in terms of schedule is just the formulaic method of scheduling. I particularly think about the NFL with an 18-week season where you don't play every other team in the league. And a lot of how the NFL does its scheduling is based on conferences, is based on divisions.
I think the biggest thing that has kind of brought this to my attention, this debate the most, is the expansion of the playoffs. I think as you expand the playoffs, my argument is going to become more and more vocal, because the more teams you let into the playoffs, that last team that gets in is going to end up being lower and lower quality. But in terms of how you formulate the schedule, I mean, we have a formula. That formula can be changed. Instead of doing it by conference, you can do it by proximity. So if you're a team in California, you will more likely have more teams in California on your schedule. You'll still have teams from elsewhere on your schedule, but we'll tilt the odds in your favor that you have. If you're the Angels, you'll play the Dodgers, the Giants, and the A's more than you do the Boston Red Sox, who are across the country.
Yeah, but I guess my argument for that is, wouldn't that be kind of like a default division anyways, though, if you were playing those teams over and over again? Like, are you just suggesting like you eliminate the standings aspect of it?
You can have divisions and have them just be meaningless. I wouldn't be against that if you just said, okay, we can have divisions, but they have no meaning anymore.
Well, they're just for scheduling purposes.
Okay.
That I could maybe get behind.
Well, a middle ground that I've always thought about, particularly in football, because you're right, it is pretty stupid that a team can win a division and just get in the playoff game. What I've always proposed as sort of a middle ground is you have the automatic qualifier, but your top 3 seeds stay as they are. And the 4th seed is treated as a wild card. So they would just fall into that standings place wherever they are. So I always look at 2020 when the Washington football team made it at 7-9, winning the NFC East. They were the 4 seed. They hosted an 11-win Tampa team. Tampa slides in as the 4 seed because Washington is treated like the wild card. And then the 5 and 6 seeds will all slide down. And then Washington becomes the 7 seed because they qualify because they won their division, but all of the teams that qualified had a better record than them, and they would just be treated like a wild card. So you keep like the division aspect of winning that, and you keep that automatic qualifier, but then you don't have an unfair, like because they're getting an advantage that they really didn't earn in that situation. I guess at that point, you're one step away from maybe abolishing the automatic qualifier, because then what you were talking about with the bloodbath that you get gets even worse because you put them on the road against a better team, and that's just going to go even worse. But I think that the divisions are still somewhat important just because you're keeping those rivalries alive. And in a bad division like the NFC East, it's keeping something at stake. That's what I enjoy about it.
Well, with that, I think our debate has come to a close. A lot of interesting things to think about. Some things that probably a lot of sports fans never even think about in the first place. So food for thought.
Yeah, we have a lot of time.
Moving into previewing upcoming events for Trinity Athletics. This Friday, today, April 11th, track and field are at Carl Knight Invite and Multi-Stephen F. Austin University in Texas for an event there. Baseball, get a series started with Centenary. Guys, what do you think about that one?
It should be interesting. They've had some tough losses this last 2 weekends. I mean, losing the Dallas and Shriner is just not very good. Definitely terrible for your NPI. Centenary, I think, is a better team than both of those two. So it'll be a tougher challenge, but it's been pretty hit or miss. I mean, they got swept by them last year at Shreveport, and then the year before that, they swept them here. So we'll see which version we get.
Yeah, and this is a Centenary team that's kind of on a bit of a down year as well.
For baseball, those games are Friday the 11th at 7, and then they've got a double header on Saturday. It's 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. Track and field continue in action the next day. In fact, the next day they're listed at 2 events, the aforementioned one, and they're also mentioned at the Cactus Cup, Texas A&M University. Not sure which of those is the real one, but you could probably figure it out on the Trinity Tigers website. As always, refer to the Trinity Tigers website if you have any questions or want any more information about these events. We've also got women's tennis in action this weekend. They're at home at 10 a.m. against Our Lady of the Lake University. Not necessarily one of their most difficult games, but an important game nonetheless. April 13th, Sunday, there are men's and women's golf SCAC championships getting started, as Reed mentioned earlier. A lot on the line there. Men's tennis are at Southwestern at 2 p.m. Monday, men's and women's golf continuing at the SCAC Championships. Tuesday, continuing at the SCAC Championships. And there is a midweek baseball one-off with Mary Hardin Baylor on the road. So that takes us all the way to Friday the 18th. And next episode, we'll join you then. For more information about this podcast, you can check out the Trinitonian Instagram page. You can also check out the Trinitonian website under sports. All the episodes are listed there. Our podcast is available on YouTube and now on Spotify. Isn't that right, Cole?
We did it.
We're on Spotify. As always, thank you for listening. Reed, thanks for joining us. Thanks for doing all the extra stuff that a normal guest doesn't have to do. And go Tigers.
Now this is podcasting.